Dad, are you there? Your seat is still empty, sparkly, but empty. It's for you. Yet, you're so far. Old yet still new, as if a throne sparkled as much as the head table chair. Still you leave it unoccupied. Such an odd phenomenon to not have your father sit at the table with your family. A space usually filled to tell you right from wrong or why men think the way they do. This space is empty for me. Filled at an entire separate seat away from my entire life. I've come to terms with what is socially odd is my normal, that my broken family is more formal than the ordinal way of living. In fact, it's so normal to me that I've not allowed myself to give anyone his title, his seat. And yet instead I call him by his real name. And it's not Dad. And so I see he set his table away from mine. And I see he moved his seat away from my table years ago. Mom, are you there? Wrapped in a cocoon of your sweet words, I hid from myself and from everything that I feared. And I didn't want to tell you because even if the experience was shared, the circumstances were so vastly different. It was the unhealthy therapy where instead of us listening to each other, there were no words said. And it was a silent agreement I never wanted. And yet it kept us put together. I'm fine, you're fine. I'm fine. This poem is called The Empty Seat, The Silent Agreement. It's a poem that I wrote for my younger self who was knocking on the door of both my mother and biological father, searching for comfort and answers. My 18th birthday was a few days ago, on the 5th actually. And while it's not quite 21, I'm more than happy to have spent my time with friends and family and a new car. Of course, on the days leading up to my childhood, I found myself reflecting of that time. Growing up, I had an emotionally and physically absent father, and he was not a good influence on any part of my life. And now that I'm older, I struggle to remember everything, but I do remember an instance where I'd placed myself in between both of them with my hands outstretched, probably trying to get them to stop arguing. By the time I was in 5th grade, I was already in no contact, and it was something that I knew that I needed for myself in order to heal. And I knew that I truly didn't need a man in my life that I knew didn't want me. This past summer, I found myself in Japan, where I had made amazing friends and stayed with this amazing family. I do think that my favorite memory being there was talking at the dinner table from 7 to 10 p.m. about anything. What are your hobbies? What's your school life like? Why do you prefer turtles over dogs? Controversial, I know. You didn't list your father on your information sheet. Does he live away from you? You could say that. And then for the next 10 minutes, I'm explaining to this family that I've known for less than a week the dynamics of my own family. That moment stuck with me because we had talked, and all of a sudden I'd found one of them crying. And I wondered why. But I smiled at her and said that it didn't hurt me. I was fine. And yet I was reflecting on this moment because I wondered why I didn't feel sad about it. It felt normal. But it wasn't normal, and I realized that I was a part of an American problem. In the United States Census Bureau, it is reported that in 2023, almost a quarter of children under the age of 18 live with one parent. Now, this doesn't seem that bad, since it's only 23% of our population. But in comparison to the worldwide average of 7% in China and 4% in Nigeria, the difference is outstanding. Now, I'm not saying that we should place the blame on single parents for something that is out of their control, but I need to bring attention to the severe disparity the US has in comparison to other countries when it comes to single parenthood. Learning this myself, I realized that I was desensitized to something that was actually very tragic. I was stuck in between a limbo of victim and victor mentality. Now, don't get me wrong, I wasn't going around saying, you know what, I'm glad my dad left me, or, my dad left me. I was stuck on and going in circles about how to actually feel. I was having to confront all these emotions that I'd left to just sit back and accumulate in the back of my head. And I'd been hurting silently for so many years that my way of grieving the father and the culture I never got to experience was by shutting off. Being so emotionally whacked out, I realized that I was not only hurting myself and the people around me, so I had to take the leap that changed my life. I spoke to my mother, and of course she didn't know that I was going through this because, as I said before, we had found ourselves in a silent agreement where we were saying to ourselves that we're okay, but thinking that we're going to go crazy. We had spoke. It was awkward and uncomfortable, having to be vulnerable and wanting to have these answers answered, but I so desperately feared the reply. You see, many kids like me, we close off our doors to people we think won't stick around. And the fear of abandonment and anxiety is so strong that we just are always constantly questioning when someone is going to deny us their love and affection. I felt abandoned myself by my biological father, and I was missing a piece of myself. I grew up in a Mexican-American and African-American household. I am Mexican-American and African-American, but I always felt like I was missing a piece of myself. And once again, I'd found myself so angry that I was cheated out of my culture, and it was because of the selfish acts of another that I never got to experience part of it. Having this mindset was dangerous, and it was bad for my mental health, and I knew that it would bleed into adulthood. So I took the leap again. That would change my life. It was emotional talking with my mother again, because I wasn't having to hold everything in and worry about what others thought, because it was just my mom. She's supposed to understand me more than anyone else. My mom is a very open person. I'm not. I've struggled to emulate this trait my entire life. And yet, I'm glad that I did, because I was able to confront my own trauma, and I allowed someone to show me that my life didn't have to follow this broken narrative. I could be so much more than that. You see, embracing vulnerability is a powerful journey that unveils persevering strength rather than weakness. It shifts your perspective, allowing you to recognize the blessings in your life rather than focusing on the self-blaming tendencies, the what-ifs, and who to blame. Instead, the transformative power of vulnerability is seen and practiced. If any of you have ever felt any of these emotions of self-deprecation and wanting to cave in, there is the possibility to achieve personal growth, the regainment in trust, and the ability to rediscover the capacity to love again. It's not easy, and it takes many years to be able to appreciate and see love the way it should be, imperfect. And that not only goes for someone else, but for within and the life you've been given. I've seen that love is a lifetime that now everyone thinks they experience in a year. It's not. It's a struggle and therefore a journey. Love is peace as much as it is struggle. It can be slow, the learning process, to make peace within. And peace for me is finally being able to address my biological father and say that your absence, it didn't hinder me. Sure, it hurt, but I still can't quite forgive you for what you did, or rather what you didn't do for me as a daughter and from my mother as a partner. But I've worked so hard to prove to myself and to others that I could do it all. And I've accomplished all this greatness just fine. So I could finally ask the person who needed who I am now most. Rocky, are you there? I know you wish you could ride into a world that you wrote in your diary, hope-filled with dreams, that he earned the right to hold your hand and walk you into kindergarten and teach you how to drive that car you finally got the permit to. But deep down, I knew you knew that day would never come, and that's okay. Because your mom didn't leave or cheat you out of a still worthwhile life. Your grandma, she held your hand nice and tight as you walked into school. And your grandpa, he showed you how to drive that car. And he showed you what a daughter is and what a father should be to her daughter, to his daughter. So I hope you know that this life isn't as bad or is as hard as you thought, because I, don't need anyone else or a stranger's love to make me feel whole again. All I need, and all you need, are the people around you. Thank you.